Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stress Free IEP, the show where we help families build their village so they can raise their neurodivergent children with confidence, clarity, and support. I'm your host, Frances Schefter, special education attorney, advocate, and fellow parent walking this journey with you. Each week, we shine a light on the professional services and real world strategies that support your child both inside and outside of school. From navigating the IEP process to finding the right providers in your community, we're here to help you connect the dots and feel empowered every step of the way. Whether you're joining us live on Facebook, YouTube, or listening later on your favorite podcast app, we're so glad you're here. Now, let's meet today's amazing guest. Shabnum Bi is an award-winning early years director and founder of Early Nurture Preschool in Birmingham, England, which is rated outstanding by Ofsted in 2025. Named MBCC Entrepreneur of the Year, she is known for early intervention, parent partnership, inclusive SEND practice, and empowering multilingual families. So I'm so excited to have her on the show today because we're going to see the differences between England and the USA. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Frances. I'm also excited as well to share our experiences and look at comparisons.
Thank you. Did I pronounce your names correctly?
You did, indeed.
Okay, good. I'm always worried about that.
No,
So,
you did.
I guess I want to start with like, what is SEND? What is that practice? Because that's not a term that I've heard here in the States.
SEND stands for special education needs. The term that I use at my preschool is additional needs. So there's a child that's always got an additional need that stands out. And that's the terminology behind SEND. So it's a child that has got a need that's been identified from an earlier on.
Okay. So it just means a special needs child.
Yeah, it's just got it could be more than one need, or it could be one need in one area. For example, you can have a child who's got delayed communication, language, cognitive, personal social skills, physical development. You might have another child who might just have a communication language delay. So what we do is we don't label the children as a disability. We'll say they've got additional need and a special educational need.
Okay, so you don't have to, as we do, stuff them in a circle or a square or a triangle.
No, I think with the parents is when it comes to early identification, the parents don't want to label the children, and neither do we as a setting. So what we tend to say and use the terminology is what I use at my preschool is that I'll say there's a need. So I'll call it additional need. So we'd put it under SEND, but it's not necessary that they've been diagnosed as a long-term SEND need. So sometimes it could be a temporary need, for example, a communication language need that just needs a bit of extra support and extra interventions, and that need may go away.
Got it. Okay, so it's kind of we have developmental delay, which we use up until, depending on the state, between 7 or 8, because we know there's disabilities, but we don't know, because in the States, when there's multiple disabilities, they kind of require us to parse out which is the main disability.
So I think it's a bit similar. So I definitely use the terminology development delay, but what I would highlight is where the delay is in what areas of need. And I'll also say that the additional need is that I'm not labeling them as a disability. So what I'll do is I will put earlier interventions in place, do the 2-year-old development check. So the main needs, but where I identify the need is at the 2-year-old development check. So it's at an earlier stage with the health visitor. What you'll find is that the child has got a development delay. It'll be highlighted in its prime areas. So it's mainly around communication, language, personal, social, and physical development. Those are the 3 areas that are my prime focus when they start. And if they have scored low, and then that's a borderline for me to say there's definitely a delay. Is it a developmental delay or is it additional need? Additional need might later on turn out to be a SEND need in the long term. But in the short term, we'll call it as additional need. That's just an area that's been identified as a need.
Got it. And so, but it's not like you're a private preschool, or is it considered public?
We are an early years provision. We offer daycare, free 15 hours educational care and 30 hours free educational care as well. So our education is completely free for the parents from the age of 2 to 5, unless they don't meet the criteria.
Got it.
But I've got probably one child that's paying for daycare, and I've got about 29 that are on the free entitlement, so the education is free.
Got it. So that's kind of like our under
The different,
IDEA, the before kindergarten level.
yeah.
So do they like when you go through eligibility, it's not directly through your school? Is it through like the county or the city? How does that work?
I'm also a qualified SENCO within my provision of the early years, but I also have a team called the Area SENCO team who I liaise with and I work with to get the extra funding. And I do get extra support when it comes to doing the SSPPs and the HCPs. So the majority of the paperwork I will do, take lead myself. I will do all the referrals, get all the extra funding in. And I'd say that we do it independently as a preschool on our own with a
Got it.
bit of extra support from the Area SENCO team.
Okay. And what's SSP?
It's this SEND provision plan. So basically,
Okay.
SSPP is we start off with the SEND support plan. So I think that you call it an IEP. Is that what you call it? The individual education plan.
So IEP is from 5 and up.
So you
Before
call it
that is the
IEP, and we call it a SEND support plan that we start off with. So they have like 2 or 3 SEND support plans. But if you find that the need is greater, then we put an SSPP in place, which brings in extra money. And that's
okay.
before an education healthcare plan takes place. So majority of my children will leave my setting with an SSPP or an EHCP. So when they start reception or the primary school, there's some form of funding there for the schools to use.
Got it. So ours start with IFSPs.
Oh, okay.
And I don't remember, it's
What it
something
stands for.
family support plan,
Okay.
because before 4, it's the preschool, and we don't necessarily have special daycares for them or special schools. It's more the service
Okay.
providers go into either the home or the daycare, wherever, the child is for the day, and teaches the care providers how to work with the child on a regular basis.
Oh, that's interesting. We do have family hubs in England that actually support families as well. And that's before they start preschool. They also have an early support service that will identify the needs as well and then liaise with us nurseries to take lead once they've started with us. So that they will discharge them from the service. But I think one of the things that England has been identified and what I've realised from my research, making comparisons, for example, with yourself and Dubai and South Korea, is that in England, the early identification and the early identification and the recognition, we do it at an earlier stage, whereas in the European countries, what I found was that a lot of the early years, firstly, they're lacking the specialised provision. Secondly, they're lacking the specialised staff. And thirdly, parents are ending up paying for the most of the process, and there's a lack of paediatricians. But where in the UK, from my research, what I found is that we are moving forward quite quick with the early identification, the early intervention, and I think that's something that's not as celebrated here in the UK, and that's something that I'm actually focusing on now. Is from my knowledge and from my expertise, is that I think we should share. We should share the knowledge widely and globally and learn from each other. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that's really stood out with me is when I went to Dubai in August. I just went on a holiday, and I was quite intrigued from the research that I had previously done. That I went to an interview a teacher at a Dubai nursery, and when I got talking, she left the UK to move into Dubai, and she said that I can put hands on say to you that UK is more forward when it comes to early identification and early interventions. When it comes to Dubai, what we're finding is that we haven't got the specialised staff, the specialised provision, and parents have to lead the pathway themselves. So there's not enough support there, and they're not doing the referrals either. And I think in England we have got paediatricians, and that's something that's quite intriguing to me at the moment. I'm not saying for all European countries, but what I'm saying is from the couple of countries that I've interviewed or I've shared conversations like yourself and other world leaders, it seems to be that there is an increase globally when it comes to special education needs and children with disabilities, with autism, OCD, ADHD. There seems to be a high level of need that seems to be affecting everyone globally.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that. So, I mean, the parents shouldn't have to do it financially themselves. And because, I mean, the law is clear in the States. under IDEA that the school systems have a duty to child find any child in their school district from 0 to 21 that could have a potential disability. Where the problem is, it's not like the school system can go knocking on everybody's door or like, hey, you just had a baby born.
Yeah.
So it's left to parents seeing, oh, maybe something's different. And where do I go? What do I do? And if they don't have a pediatrician that knows, or they don't have friends or family that know, they're kind of lost a little bit.
Yeah, they slip the net. And I think from my 24 years of experience within the early years, what I found was I'll find that these are difficult conversations that we have with parents. So you often find that parents are in denial, or they've got a set of twins and they would be comparing the two children. And I have experienced that as well, where one child had autism, one child was absolutely fine. She was constantly comparing the two. And it took me 9 months to get one referral in. So you can see the time scale. And I think what I found was, and what's really useful for myself was to refer them to the health visitor for a 2-year-old development check. And I'll be like, I would do assessment myself and I'd identify the need. And I'll say to them, I think we should have another development check from the health visitor. What do you think, Mum? And they'd be like, yeah, okay then. So once they've had that development check, I mean, the health visitor's also highlighted the fact that I think the communication language is very low and the primaries are very low. I think the parents then compare the two. So they compare myself and my assessments to the health visitor, come back. And I'll be like, well, all we've got to do is put a bit of interventions in place and we'll monitor it, Mum. You know, every 12 weeks we'll do a review. And that's what I do is the IEPs that we call SEND support plans, 12 weeks are reviewed. So in 12 weeks' time, if that child's made a bit of improvement, we'll say, okay, Mum, he's making progress, I'm not concerned. But if the child's not making any progress after 12 weeks, what we'll do is we'll put him on a plan number 2. At this stage, we're referring him for a hearing test now. So we're adding on a few more things. So I'll say, Mum, I think we need to have a hearing test. Let's see if he passes hearing. But what you find some of the times is that if they've got communication language delay, it's unlikely they will pass the hearing test. And that's one of the signs for myself as well. So we'll have a hearing test. Once I've had a hearing test and that's failed, I'll say, okay, I think we should do a speech and language referral just to get a bit of language support in. Once they've attended that speech and language session, the speech and language therapist will say, I think we need a few more targets of language. And that kind of builds a bit more professionals around the family. And the mom, the parents have got a shared input from different professionals. So they feel a bit more at ease and we're building trust gradually. And I think, again, it's about, I think, well, personally, I look at least 12 to 20 weeks before I start doing referrals to the paediatrician. And that's only when the child's made not much progress at all. We're looking at significant now, complex delay. We're looking at the early years foundation stage curriculum now. So we're looking at the prime areas. We're looking at delays across the prime areas. And what we do is we say to the parents, I think academically we need extra support now. We need extra funding to support that child to have more intensive interaction time, more language-focused activities, more choices, visual timetables, visual routines. And I think once we explain that to the parents, they're quite satisfied because I think when we explain that it's a 1-to-4 ratio rather than a 1-to-8 ratio, and they can get that intensive interaction and they can get that quality interaction and differentiated curriculum, the parents do come on board. And I think it's having those trustworthy conversations that build that parents' trust.
Yeah, I like that because, like, with us, most of our counties and states, they like do okay. We see a delay, and they'll just assess everything at once.
Yeah,
and then the parents get bombarded. And like when my daughter was assessed, it was literally that same day. Like they do all the assessments, and then we review the results. And even me with my degree in special ed and all of my experience and stuff, it was still overwhelming. Like they're telling me this and they're telling me that, and there's a 25% delay, or there's not, or it's atypical. And it's a lot of information to understand.
And take, yeah. I think what we do is there's a process. So I break it down. So for example, if a 2-year-old starts with me in September, I'm looking at an EHCP in 2 years' time. So when they're about to leave me. So I've given those 2 years of different types of assessments, different types of observations, different professionals are coming in, giving their input. So you'll find some children will leave me, well, majority of the children will leave me without a diagnosis because we're looking at the neurological pathway now. I don't know what you call it, the people that diagnose with autism and ADHD, we call it the NDP now. And that's a 2-year waiting list. So that's
Wow.
the time scale is long now. The pediatricians, we're looking at a 6 months waiting list. For the
Wow.
speech and language, we're looking at a 4 weeks waiting list. The health visitor, you're probably looking at a 2 weeks waiting time. So there's a process that we follow. So what I'll say to the parents is that after about 6 months, say, Mum, I think he's definitely showing traits of autism. We need to put an NDP referral in. And what I always say to the parents is, gathering from the observations that I've made in assessments, if it's nothing, it's going to come down as nothing. And if it's
Right.
something, then they will get diagnosed with something. But we don't want to take that risk as like it might not be nothing. Let's just refer the child. And if it
Right.
comes back as nothing, it's nothing. And I always give an example of for example, as they grow older, some get better and some needs get greater. So I can't diagnose that child. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a
Right.
pediatrician. All I can give you is that the assessments that I've carried out, there's definitely delays. And from my experience, this is where the delays are. So what we do is we do different types of assessments. So for example, if a child has got additional needs, they'll have a DFE tool separate from the Department of Education, which is really broken down to very small areas. For example, uses single words, drinks from an open cup, responds to action. So the targets will be very simplified. And so I think it's out of 72 that they've got a score. So every term they've probably improved by 5%, 10%, 15%. But if they're not making no progress at all, that's one of the tools that I will use with the parents. The second is the sensory circuit. So they're taking part in the sensory circuit every day, where it's alerting, they're doing jumping, they're doing skipping, they're doing rolling. Are they copying actions? Are they actually interacting with staff? Are they not? And again, it's drawing quality observations with the parents and sitting down and talking to parents and comparing. And I always say to parents, could you make a list of things that you're unsure about at home? And what I'll make a list of the behaviours that I think are concerning at the preschool, and we compare the two. And I think that's when you find a lot of the time parents will say, well, actually, he doesn't do that at home. He only does it at the preschool. Or if there's something that he does at the preschool that he doesn't do at home. And I'd be like, so what do you suggest? Do you think we should put an extra referral in that? And again, I think it's about not judging the parents and not
Right.
making it like they're at fault. It's just that it's a delay, and we have to make sure that we've got accurate observations. And again, I think from a multi-agency approach, what we look at is when we've got speech and language involved, we've got the hearing people, audiology involved, we've got pediatricians involved, we've got education psychologists involved. The parents have got that input from different professionals, and we've given it a
Right.
tier scale. So by the time they start reception year one, they've got some form of funding in place. And what I always say to the parents, if you do not want an education healthcare plan or an SSPP, we won't suggest it. We will work with you, but as long as we've put an early intervention in place, so there's some form of paperwork in place to say there's been a need that's been identified, Mum. So later on, if you change your mind in school and is starting to show a greater delay in his progress, at least they've got a format ready.
Interesting. See, and we don't have, like, on our medical side, we do have those delays, but on the education side, so the difference is we don't have to have a diagnosis. A school psychologist can identify characteristics of
Mm-hmm.
whatever autism,
Yeah.
ADHD, whatever it is. And we have in the States very strict timelines. Like from referral, if parents say, hey, something's going on, I need an assessment, they have for an initial assessment, they only have 60 days. The school system
Wow.
has to evaluate and come to the table to review the assessments in 60 days.
Wow. And is that a true
Right.
reflection of the child is what I would question. Because with ours, is obviously it's a 2 year process. It's a very lengthy process. But I
It's
find if you've got accurate observations in place and you've given it a time scale. And I think with 60 days, there's a lot of information that you'd want. And is it a true reflection
right.
of the child?
It does the basic assessment, and
Mm.
that's the thing. And it's just looking at the educational side. And that's where the difference between the educational assessment going through the school system or private. Because if you do a
Mm.
private assessment, obviously it gives you full picture.
Full picture. And there's a
But in
cost
this,
for that, right?
right, that's private. Sometimes you can get it through your insurance, sometimes not. But that the difference here is that we have the medical and then we have the school side.
Okay.
And what the school likes to do when parents do pay for the outside evaluation, schools like to say, well, it's a medical problem. It's not a school
Mm.
problem. We don't need to do anything.
Oh, wow. So, for
Yeah.
example, like with us, with the educational healthcare plan, it brings the money into the school. So if your children have got a private diagnosis and they've got an educational healthcare plan, does that school get extra funding to
Yes.
support that
If
child? It
if the
does.
child Yeah, if the child has an IEP or an IFSP, there's definitely extra funding. It's based on like least restrictive
Mm,
environment for us. So what's the percentage they're outside of
mm.
general education and what additional supports?
Does
And
the
that,
EHCP get reviewed every year like us? Like we have to do a review, then for an education healthcare plan gets reviewed every year,
yep,
whereas an IEP I review every 12 weeks. So there's a
no,
format that we follow.
IEP is every year.
Oh, okay.
That's
See,
it.
with ours, is the SEND support plan that I devise is reviewed every 12 weeks, but that doesn't bring in money. That just brings in extra funding that I have to apply from a different local authority, which is the Oversenko Inclusion Team. So the only money that we can get, the school can get, is an SSPP or an EHCP.
Mhm.
And again, I think with nationally, and I think with Princess Catherine, the Royal Foundation for Shapers, I don't know if you've heard about it, it's something new that's come out. The Royals, she's talking about early interventions as well, and she's talking about putting in the right support at an early from birth to 5, and those are the
Yeah,
most important years of a child. And I think that's what I believe in as well, that if we don't get it right from an earlier stage, later on when we go to school, the needs get greater.
yeah. And the problem is what I see often is that uh, parents don't always know. Like you have your first child,
Yeah,
right?
you do.
You don't know what's normal.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, I mean, most of the I don't even want to say most. I know the doctors that I've always gone to do what we call the SDQs,
Okay.
um,
I think we call it the
something developed.
SQ. We call it, I think it's ASQ, the questionnaire, development check.
Yeah, the questionnaire or SQ. Yeah, it's something like SQ some, but it's basically the parents check, like, is your child
Yeah,
bouncing a ball? Is your child skipping? Is and
to
all through
start.
that. And then if there's a difference, okay, now we refer to the school system to
Mm,
do an assessment. But again, parents don't always know.
mm,
And one of the things that, like, I know in the States, what changed our autism definition is it used to be like when I was in school way back when and in my master's program and stuff, it was if it wasn't identified by 3, the child wasn't autistic. It couldn't be an autism diagnosis,
okay.
which parents that don't know, they don't know. And the child doesn't go to school until 5 years
Not
old,
been identified.
right, and have not been
Yeah.
identified and now can't be identified. And that's when we started with the I'm blanking on the name again, but they came up with
The education
with
healthcare plans. And,
well, no, with the autism diagnosis,
oh,
like now
okay.
it's a spectrum.
So what
And
do
so
you call,
now,
so who diagnoses the autism? So with us, it's the NDP, the neurological pathway.
so it's any doctor, basically,
Oh, okay. So
psychologist can do
there's
it.
no real name for it. So with us, is the education psychologist will do a report, but it'll be the NDP that do the formal diagnosis.
Yeah, so
Whereas the,
our school psychologist does has characteristics of, and
okay.
that's enough to get an IEP in place and get federal funding.
See, ours is, I think, the opposite. So I do the IEPs, the SEND support plans. I've got to get a number of professionals involved in order for the paediatricians to be involved. Once the paediatricians are involved, the referral goes to the NDP. The NDP will call out for a speech and language report, an educational psychologist report, occupational therapy report, education report, and that's when they will call out the parents for a final diagnosis. So it's quite a lengthy process.
Yeah, that makes sense. But
It's quite
but during your process, the child's still getting some services, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to. When we launched Early Nurture Preschool, so before I was leading a preschool for 20 years, and I was
Mhm.
under the private voluntary sector. One of the things that I was known for was the SEND provision that I've been providing for the last 20 years. When I was given the opportunity to launch Early Nurture Preschool, one of the core values that I devised was early intervention and early identification. That was going to be my vision of my preschool.
Yeah.
And that was something that I felt very strong about, because I think if that need is not being identified at an earlier stage, it would only get greater as they get older.
Yeah.
And I think that message needs to go across, is that everyone should be able to identify a need. And there
Yeah.
should be some form of pathway where parents can access. It could be the GP, it could be the health visitor, it could be a paediatrician, it could be anyone in your local community that can take that lead. I think that's what we need. And one of the things that I am arguing in England as well is, at the moment, what I recommend is that the 2-year-old development checks become statutory, because they're not statutory at the moment. And a lot of the parents don't have to have the 2-year-old development checks because they don't see it as a vital importance. And to me, I think if the 2-year-old development checks were statutory, then those needs would be identified straight away at the age of 2.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, because of, like, vaccines and stuff like that, we're at the doctors way too often, I think, but need to be because of the vaccines and the schedules and stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know if I mean, vaccines are not legally required. I don't know,
So with us, is
if
we
yeah,
encourage parents to have their vaccinations. Like for example, measles. We've got a high intake of measles at the moment, and what we did is the Department of Education came out to the setting and spoke to the parents, and spoke about the importance of the immunisation and what's in that immunisation. So again, it's getting the message across. So we had the banners up for a whole week to promote it to the parents. But again, it was their choice to go and get it done. But what we did was that we've educated the parents from our point of view. We've shared the
mhm,
message across of why is it that we are asking the parents to have the immunisation for the child, and what are the
right,
consequences if they don't have it done. So again, I think a lot of the time, what's compulsory and what's not compulsory, it's about how are you educating the parents, and
right.
that's key. And I think
Yeah,
again, that's on social media as well. I think it's about working closely within the community. So one of the things that I am known for is I have got a very good relationship with my community. You know, I'm connected to the local GP centres, Department of Education. I work closely with my local bishop, the councillors, the MPs. So whatever services they've got available, we will bring into our preschool and we'll share it out.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's so interesting, but, like, I mean, vaccines are required to go into schools in most preschools unless you get a waiver for medical or religious waiver and things like that. Um, but I
So
don't know. I now I'm
do you have in the USA, do you have areas like from the age of 0 to 5?
What do
Have
you
they
mean?
got kindergarten nurseries from the age of 0 to 5?
At 5 is when that's compulsory education.
So under 5, is there a provision where parents can access like stay in plays or nurseries or preschools?
They access so under 5, there are some areas that have, like, state funded if you qualify, like,
Yeah.
financially. Some states have, like, Head Start or early intervention, usually at 3,
Oh,
so
okay.
3 and 4. But when it comes to special education services, that's from birth to 5.
Oh,
That
okay.
the counties each county is required to identify, that's the child find, identify and then provide
Mhm.
services if there's a need. Um, Sometimes where the hiccup is that schools give pushback and say, "Oh, yes, we there is signs of autism, but it's not enough of delay to
Yeah.
need services." And so that's how they get away with it rather than a like, "Hey, this is a kid, there's a need there, there's a need, let's provide services." It has to be like certain threshold to be enough of a delay to provide services.
And I think that's where the SEND infrastructure comes into it. So in the UK, we're undergoing a major reform at the moment due to the system crisis, with proposals to designate services as a critical national infrastructure. So they're looking at to manage rising costs, looking at private providers to make key changes. They're looking at having more independent providers to start doing digitally EHCPs and IEPs. And they're looking at more training for mainstream schools and making mainstream schools more of an inclusion-based provision. So what they're going
Mhm.
to do is that we're going to have lack of special schools, but have more inclusive, integrated mainstream provision for these children. And I think that's something that the infrastructure in the long term is changing. I think it's by 28 and 29 that they are looking at, the government is looking at pushing more children to access mainstream school.
And that's what we do, that like in the States, that's where it starts is is when looking at a child for eligibility, and this is, mainly 5
Mm,
on because it's compulsory education, um, is that they're looking at least restrictive environment. And so the least restrictive environment is general education with supports. That doesn't mean it's the most appropriate environment for every
yeah,
child, but it's the least restrictive. And that's where
yes.
you need to start. They call it homeschool model somewheres. And then is that appropriate? Is the child getting benefits or not? And then you go more restrictive. I hate that they do it this way. It's the way the law is written, but more restrictive means less time with general education students
Oh, okay.
and more time with special education students.
See, with us is the opposite now, what I've been told by Ofsted, because I think, do you have Ofsted inspections?
Do we have what
Do your
inspections?
schools get inspected by Ofsted? That's the local authority that we get inspected, and that's one of the things that I've done my research as well. The European countries don't seem to have an inspection. So there's no one from the education sector. So we get Ofsted. So for example, I'm at standing, and we were given that grade by Ofsted. So the Ofsted inspectors come out and we get graded. So they look at child development, they look at safeguarding, they look at how do we deliver health, behaviour of the children, attitudes of staff, leadership, and then we get a grade. So for example, you've got grade 1 outstanding, grade 2 is good, you've got satisfactory, requires improvement. But I think with the European countries, a lot of the schools don't have inspections.
Well, in the US, we do.
You do.
Well, yes, the federal government grades the states, and the states grade the counties. Right now, where our federal government is, we're not going to go down that political
No,
route.
that's fine.
Yeah,
But
but
see,
they do.
the only reason I questioned that was with us, with Ofsted, we have to be inclusive.
Mhm.
We have to adapt our environment and offer a differentiated curriculum to meet the needs of all children. And we've got to try and make them as inclusive as we can into the infrastructure. So when it comes to storytelling, snack time, lunchtime, we've got to make sure that those children are integrated into the larger groups of the mainstream children.
And that's what we do. That's what's supposed to be with the least restrictive
The
environment,
long
more
term.
restrictive environment is that if they're getting benefit from and can benefit from and make progress in the general education setting, then that's when they start. If they can't, now let's look at what additional supports. Do they need to be pulled out just for like math and reading, some a little bit of instruction, or do they need a special education classroom? And if that's the case, okay, then for specials and lunch and recess, are they okay integrated with the
Yeah.
general education? And then you keep, if they're not, then what are we looking at? More restrictive.
So,
And the
like in
continuum of
England,
services.
the schools also have resource-based provision available now. So they've built like speech and language bases and resource bases. Have they got that in the USA?
Yes, so those are related services, they're called. And so
Okay.
if you need like occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, those are all a separate person does the evaluation and comes to the IEP team and recommends services. Most of the time they're pull out services, sometimes, and that what we mean pull out is they're taken out of the general education setting into a special education setting for those services. Sometimes it's push-in services, meaning the speech person will come in and provide the services within the general education classroom.
I get it.
It depends
So
on
in
the needs.
England, or the resource bases are specialised classrooms that are in a mainstream school. So the children will be in those bases, but when it comes to lunchtime, snack time, maths and reading, they might be integrated into those classes and then back into the base. So they differentiate their learning, but at the same time, they're in a mainstream school in a specialised class, but they are giving opportunities to integrate into the mainstream classes and back.
Yes, we have that as well, and it's all based on needs. And
Needs,
sometimes
yeah.
we have yeah, so, like, sometimes there is a home base and it's, like, all the core, they need the differentiate we call it
I
specialized
think what
instruction.
I've found is that in the years of experience that the needs are getting greater.
Yeah.
And I think the data's getting higher, like there's more children now. I don't know whether we're getting better at identifying the needs or whether there's a sudden increase. And I think what I'm realizing is that there's a sudden increase globally. It's not just
Yeah.
nationally where I am. I just seem to see that it's everywhere. It's become, and I think one of the things that I'm interested in research is that why is there a sudden increase? So, what's causing the data to increase? What is it? All of a sudden, like when I was young, I don't think autism was ever identified or OCD or ADHD. I remember there was disability and disabled children that went to a specialised school, but I didn't really realize, I didn't really hear about autism or ADHD. And I think it's only been for the last 16, 17 years of my career when autism seems to have become.
And I think for us, like, it's the same here in the States, but I think for us, it's been the definition has changed so much. Because as I said, it used for autism especially, it used to be if you weren't identified before the age of 3, you were an autism. And it was a very strict of what autism is. like not making eye contact,
Yeah.
usually nonverbal, having, language skills issues, being in their own little words, stimming, they call,
Yeah,
the
there's
mood,
different
constant
types of
moving.
autism, isn't there?
Right. And if you don't have that, then you're not autistic. Whereas now it's such a spectrum. We have, and I hate using high functioning, that's what they use it, but we have kids that are on the spectrum that are in general education. They make
Yeah.
eye contact, they have relationships, they do some sort of stimming, but it's different. They have different sensory needs.
Yeah.
But where it comes out more is social, the
Yeah.
social issues. When
Definitely.
I was younger and when I did my master's, it was social issues. Those are home issues, not school issues. And now schools are realizing that the social issues are impacting the education. And so they are part of the IEPs and the development and what needs to be provided by the school system.
But you
And
also get, I think we've also had a handful of children that are exceeding in the literacy and numeracy, so the
mhm.
gifted and talented.
Yep,
You
we have
find
those.
that, they've got a huge interest in numbers and they've got a huge interest in letters, but nothing else. So when it comes to
Mhm.
playing or putting two bricks together or doing a simple inset puzzle, there's no interest at all. Their focus is mainly literacy and numeracy. And that's something as well that we found that was a repeated pattern over the years as well. So you get some children that are really gifted and talented and have got a high interest in literacy and numeracy, and that's normally a start sign for me as well. Or it's the opposite, like he said, there's no eye contact, there's no language at all, there's no interaction, and you find that they lead their own play, they're very isolated, and they just, like you said, they're in their own little world,
Yep.
and they require a high intensity support. They require visual routine. They need high quality staff interactions and quality teaching. And I think that's again something that sometimes is a challenge, because when you've got a high percentage of children with additionals, they're not bringing much funding in, but then you've got a high number of mainstream children. And I think that's something that the education sector, I think, needs to consider more, is the balance.
Yeah.
Yes, we are trying to be as inclusive as we can, but it can become a real challenge of reality as well, because every single child's going to have a different need.
Yep.
Like I have children aged 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you can imagine there's a difference in their ages, there's a difference
Yeah.
in their abilities, there's a difference in how they perform, how they learn. And now we're looking at planning in accordance to their interests. Now every child's got a different interest. So what is it that I want to plan, and how am I going to plan it to meet the needs of all these 30 children? And I think,
Right.
again, education itself has become a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Because there's too many. I mean, and one of the things here in the States, the big thing that's been, or at least I'm seeing, is our education system hasn't changed in
Yeah,
50
not
years. And, look at if you look at technology and life and everything else from 50 years ago,
change. Yeah.
like we're still expecting kids to learn math, to learn history, to learn science. That's not life. That's not real,
But I think
and
in the
sit at a
early
desk,
years,
you
I
know?
think in the early years, like with us now, I think that's where it's changing.
Yeah.
Where like our focus when it comes to literacy and maths now, that's a specific area. So our curriculum is split into 7 areas of learning. So that we call the prime areas are personal, social, emotional, physical development, and communication and language. And those are the 3 areas that I am going to focus on until they're secure, in order for them to
Mhm.
go on to maths and literacy and knowledge understanding and expressive arts, because I think the main vital core is they need to be secure in their prime areas. They need to be able to socialize. They need to be
Yep.
able to play with their friends, join in the activities, communicate basic needs. And I think that's where, again, the key education is differentiating the learning and the curriculum with a lot of those teachers and a lot of staff is when they've gone to universities and they've got these degrees, the degrees don't really focus on differentiated planning. They don't really focus on individualized planning unless you're doing a degree in special needs. Yes, you
Mhm.
probably do a semester or an assignment on it, but it doesn't give a clear reflection of a
Yep.
teacher's role in reality. And I think that's where I struggled when I was younger. I think I was 19 when I qualified as a practitioner. And I didn't know I had to plan, to be honest, when I first started. And, it was watching the managers plan and watching how they deliver. It took me, I think, about a good couple of years to actually learn how to plan. And then one of the things
Yeah.
I realized was once I understood how they plan, I didn't want to plan the way they were
Yeah.
planning. So I started my own planning. So once I started to devise my own planning, I had an interest in SEND all of a sudden. So I did my SENCO training. And once I did that, I did an autism training. Once I did my autism training, I did a behaviour course. And once I did my own reflection and my own teaching, I realised, well, actually, if I plan the way I want to plan, I understand it. And I think that, again, it's about people. You have this curriculum and you think you have to plan it in a certain way. And I think
Yep.
you don't. What you need to do is plan it in a way that fits your provision the best. And
Right.
looking at what is it that I want my children to learn, because every year you're going to get a different group of children.
Yep.
And every year you're going to have a different types of planning. And I think one of the things I've realised is you spend so much time planning, but do you actually understand the planning? So what I tend to say to my staff is, I don't want you to spend hours writing the plan. I want you to deliver the plan. So I want to deliver that activity to me, tell me what the learning outcomes are of that activity, rather than planning that activity for hours. And I think that's something that I've learned from my own experiences. I've spent hours planning this fantastic lesson plan, but I can't really deliver it in action. You know, I really don't know what my aim is
Right.
of that activity. And one of the things I focus on is the intention. What is the intention of that activity? How am I going to implement it, and what's the impact? And those are the three I's that I always focus on. So the intention, implementation, and the
Amazing.
impact. So was the
Yeah.
activity impactful? Why is it that I want to teach that activity? And how am I going to plan it? And what are the children getting out of it? And so what I tend to do is plan that one activity. It could be for 30 children, but it's again how
Mhm.
you differentiate that one activity.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's so like I love that. That's why I love teaching because it wasn't about the kids anymore.
Yeah,
It was like, here's the curriculum that you need to teach, and here's
that's it.
how
Yeah,
you need to teach it, and here's what you need to say. Like there was no lesson planning. My lesson planning was, okay, I'm on chapter 4, lesson number 3,
yeah,
and that was it. And the delivery was the same. Here's what you need to say.
yeah,
Here's
three
how you
I's.
need to teach it. And it was just I couldn't do it
It was a
anymore. I'm like,
structure. Yeah,
yeah, it's like this is not what my kids need because then it was also all the kindergartners need to lead the same things. I'm sorry, kindergartners from this part of, from Miami are very different from kindergartners
yeah.
from New York and their life experiences and how they learn and everything else. Like, and let alone within Miami, different parts of Miami, like it
And I think
just,
it's looking at you got some children that come from deprived areas with us. You get some families that are from disadvantaged. You got some working class families, and it's
yeah,
again looking at what class they come from and
yeah,
have they got siblings. And majority of the time, it's the only child
yeah,
that's got this identified need, like you said earlier, that when you've got the only child, you don't know what to do. You don't know who to
yeah.
compare them to. And they've never had to share the toys. They've never had to take turns. So sometimes it's just a learned behaviour. And it's not even identified need. You find that because they've never had to share the toys. You know,
Right,
they've never had to do anything themselves because everything was done for them. So
right.
sometimes it's a behaviour that's a learned behaviour or it's a copied behaviour that they've picked up from somewhere. And again, I think it's, like you said, I think it's about educating staff.
Yeah,
And you can't really change the mindsets of the government. I think what I am grateful is that yes, there is a SEND crisis, and we have identified that there is a SEND crisis globally and nationally now.
yeah,
What are we going to do about it moving forward? And I think one of the things is that yes, we are looking at integrating children into mainstream school with extra form of funding and educating staff. But I think what I'm really scared about or reluctant about is that our mainstream school is going to be able to meet the needs of the complex needs of the children that have got a significant complex delay.
yeah.
Are we going to be, and are we ready for that? And I think what it is, I think personally, there should have been a set number of special schools and a set number of mainstream schools. And I liked that idea. But with us, obviously, in England now, we're trying to reduce the number of special schools and increase the number of mainstream children going into mainstream schools.
Yeah. And where we are is we have all the continuum is there. It's not perfect. But it's trying to find how to meet all of the needs of
Yeah.
everyone.
And I think that's
And it's
struggle
just
in itself.
yeah, it's like it's the way the school system here is set up right now, it's not set up to be able to do that at all. At all. And so there needs to be a change, but it's a global change that needs
It's
to
a global
happen. And
change, yeah.
yeah,
And I
and
think
good luck
that's
with
what's
that.
interesting is like, what I find really intriguing at the moment is like talking to yourself. I'm also taking part on online virtual meetings now. So I
Mhm.
did one, I think, a couple of months ago, and there was like 30 world leaders from 30 different countries. And again, it's getting perspectives of these philosophers that are very highly educated. And they emphasize on outdoor learning. And they
Mhm.
found that the children who had additional needs were learning better outdoors than indoors because there was closed environments. And again, I think it's looking at ways of what works best for yourself. And I was quite intrigued with that. I thought, well, actually, yeah, my children are better outdoors than indoors.
Yeah. Who wouldn't? Yep. No, I know. And it's that we have that a lot. School without walls and those type of project-based learning are starting to pop up more and more here. I just noticed the time. Oh my goodness. It's been, which I love it. It's been so
It's been
awesome and great.
amazing. It has.
Huh?
And I think looking at international comparisons is always intriguing. There's always a
Yes,
lot to learn. But it's been lovely
definitely.
talking to yourself.
It has been
It's been
wonderful talking to
amazing.
you as
And
well.
you.
And thank you for being on our
No, you're
show.
most welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Stress Free IEP. We hope today's conversation gave you new tools, insights, or just a little more peace of mind as you support your neurodivergent child. Next week, we'll have episode 145, where Taya Mullis will talk about building independence through travel. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone in your village. You can always learn more and connect with me at schefterlaw.com or follow along on social media. Until next time, remember, you do not have to do it all alone.